Hello, our truth warriors, and welcome back to another important conversation here on the Atlantic Underground podcast. Today's guest is an exceptional lawyer who is prepared to go that extra mile to get the results. He is known for his ability to go up against the big boys like Volkswagen and Deutsche Bank. He worked at the Research Center for Medical and Pharmaceutical Law, where he obtained his doctorate and was also part of the ethics committee for the university hospitals. All this experience put him in a perfect position to launch a class action lawsuit on faulty PCR tests, as well as now pushing forward an investigation into the legitimacy of the coronavirus measures and its rollout. This has the potential of mass accountability leading to a Nuremberg trial 2.0. Reiner Fuellmich, welcome to the Atlantic Underground podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and probably a pleasure too.
It's always a pleasure when we have great conversation.
Good.
Okay, so let's start off with what compelled you to take such an enormous battle against this multifaceted assault upon humanity.
It's probably my background as a trial lawyer and, of course, my childhood. My father was probably influential. My father was a police officer in the town of Bremen, which is one of the cities of the Hanseatic League, and he was always very proud of being a citizen of the free and Hanseatic city of Bremen. When we were little, my brother and sister, he would take us to the marketplace of that town, and there's this statue, the Roland. He's a knight with a sword drawn, protecting someone who is lying. It's a handicapped, a crippled person lying beneath his feet. And that's what my father kept telling me and us. This is what it's all about. Protect those who can't protect themselves. It's about justice. It's about honesty, integrity, and freedom and courage. These virtues that some of us in the West seem to have forgotten all about, even those people in Bremen have. So he's the one who must have instilled this in me. He was kind of frustrated for a while when he was working as a criminal detective because whenever he was investigating the really big guys, the politically or economically well-connected, he was told, stop the investigation. And when I decided I was going to go into law school and study law, he said, this is probably not a good idea, but if you're going to do it, you have to know that ultimately you will come up against those rich and well-connected people, and then I'm afraid you're not going to be able to go any further. And I said, well, let's see. And so this is what I've been doing over the last 30 years. My colleagues and I at my firm in Göttingen, that's where we're located at, we have represented almost exclusively consumers and small and medium-sized businesses, always against large, usually criminal corporations, global criminal corporations such as Deutsche Bank, such as VW, but also the world's largest shipping company called Kühne and Nagel. Hardly anybody knows it, but it's the world's largest shipping company, totally corrupt.
Unbelievable, but it's what we're seeing in this day and age, and I think with the centralization of corporations forming under the umbrella of so very few oversight companies, it's very easy for them to control what goes on. We're seeing it in so many ways around the world right now, certainly with certain ideologies that are being pushed, and they're using these huge corporations to do it. And it's amazing how much of a lockstep they're in together in a way to get their point across, to continue pushing their ideologies and the agenda that they wish to achieve.
Yeah, it's incredible, but I guess I wasn't totally surprised, because part of my experience in the courts of law was, of course, that You may win some of these cases when you go up against Deutsche Bank in particular, because it is the bank of the criminals. That's what they call it. It is the bank of the criminals. That's how they really make money. It's not investment banking and private banking and business banking. It's the other section, which the world doesn't get to see. And whenever, like when you go all the way up, of course, you may win at the trial level, you may even win at the appellate level. But when you go up to the Supreme Court level, that's when they usually catch you, because up there, total corruption. There's in Germany, the German Supreme Court has, I believe, 13 what they call senates. They're panels of judges, usually 5 of them on these panels, and they all specialize in family law, trust law, and one of them, the 11th Senate, specializes in bank law. And these people, in my experience, are totally corrupt, totally corrupt. So that's where you're usually stopped. And I used to think that, and my colleagues did too, that it may have something to do with us as lawyers not arguing it the right way, or maybe we should wear a different dress or a different suit. Of course, that didn't have anything to do with it. And also, at that level, there are only 30-somethings, 36 or 38 lawyers in Germany who are admitted to that Supreme Court level. So they are the only ones who can argue your cases there. We do have one colleague who would argue all of our cases there, really smart guy. Ultimately, he was totally frustrated. He knew that, of course, we were right, and he knew they were wrong. But for some strange reason, he didn't understand that the system was rigged. He just didn't understand it. In the meantime, he's still a good guy, but he's on the wrong side of the fence as far as the pandemic is concerned. And that's why I think, you know, the reason why you're on the wrong side of the fence, I have come to conclude, is that there's one important part of your consciousness missing, and that's spirituality. I'm not talking about religion, but spirituality is so important. I think it's going to be crucial to all of this. And if you don't have it, you may be the smartest person in the world, and you're still not going to understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certain connections that people are going to need to make over the next few years as things change. And as you say, this spirituality, and I'm on the same wavelength with you on that. It's a very, very important thing that people understand how that works and how they can tap into this. Because as things move forward, I think we're coming out of a very dark era into an era of light. And I do believe that people need to embrace that. And certainly those that won't be able to embrace it are going to suffer the change and the move forward with that. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Now, I can imagine that the research required to build such a large case has the constant influxes of new information are coming in all the time to support this. Do you see what you're doing becoming multiple single cases for this, or will it be an all-encompassing trial that holds many accountable for their part in what now appears to be absolute gross negligence on a grand scale?
We think it's not gross negligence. It goes far beyond that. This is intent, and we can show it. However, and we've had the evidence, we've collected the evidence over the last 2.5 years, or almost 3 years now. If these were, I was going to say normal times, but we've never had normal times. If the judiciary was functioning in Germany or in the UK or in the United States, there's more people more judges in the American system who are still willing to uphold the rule of law than there are in any other place. Germany is probably the worst one. You probably heard about the case of this judge who was just sentenced to 2 years on probation simply because he did what he was supposed to do, looked into the matters, went into the merits of the case, and did the right thing. Well, at any rate. So we believe it is the totality of the evidence that we've gathered through all these interviews, all of these interviews gave us new information, new facts. But at the same time, this new information, these new facts were evidence. And a number of attorneys from all over the world seem to have understood that right from the start. That's why they got in touch with us when I was still working at the other outfit. Now I'm with my version of this investigative committee, which is ICIC, the International Crimes Investigative Committee. But even then, those other attorneys wanted me to connect them with Dr. Mike Yeadon, Professor Susharit Bhakti, and all the others. And that's what I did. At that point, this is in late 2020, maybe early 2021, most of us still believe that if only the politicians and the judges understood what's really going on, if only they were able to see the real facts, then they would immediately correct their course and then everything would be back to normal, or what I thought was normal. Of course, that's not the case because the entire system has been rigged. We know that for the last 30 years, maybe longer, the other side's been able to infiltrate the system on all levels. Politicians, everybody knows about the Young Global Leaders thing from the WEF. So this is what's been happening, and that's what poses the real problem. And that's what I think is going to make it absolutely, totally impossible to save this system. It is corrupt through and through. It is destined to collapse. The important thing is that when this tipping point comes, it is up to us, those of us who are on the right side of the fence, to grab the steering wheel and make sure that from then on, things are going to go our way. And these other people are going to be held responsible. They cannot be held responsible inside the systems courts of law, as they say, corporate system, because that's what it is. We are being run by corporations, and these corporations are owned by those probably few people who are pulling their strings, who are investing their money, which is of course our money, which they've stolen from us. They're investing their money into those investment vehicles like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, et cetera, and through these investment vehicles, they then invest the money in those 140 something global corporations, which they're using to run the world's economies. And when I realized that, and my colleagues realized that it's of no use to file anything inside this totally rigged system, we were in search of a judiciary that is totally independent of this corporate system. And my friend Dexter Reinefeld, South African attorney, and also a member of this group of international attorneys, which did this model grand jury investigation almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And he came upon an interview on the Stu Peters show. Stu Peters interviewed a New Zealander by the name of Antoinette James, and she was talking about how this is probably the only judiciary in the world that is totally independent, that still has its sovereignty. And that is the truth. There's a legal scholar. She's also, she holds a PhD in history on our team. And she and we, all of us, looked at all the documents, at the Declaration of Independence of 1835 and all the other treaties. And there can be no doubt about the fact that that judiciary, that of Maori, is really, truly independent. The only problem is unity, because on the one hand, of course, it's great that they have their totally independent hapu, those small communities or tribes that are represented by the rangatira, which is their chiefs. On the one hand, it's great because that's probably what we're going to need to set up a new system. We have to do it bottom up and not have any global entity that controls us, like the WHO, like the United Nations, and all the other corrupt institutions, which are run by the very same people who own those global corporations. On the other hand, if you're so fiercely independent and constantly fight with each other, that is exactly what the other side wants you to do. It's their divide and conquer strategy, which is also at play here. So that is our most important task right now. But I think by the end of the week, we will have come to a conclusion and we'll be ready to start with the proceedings, with the legal proceedings, either in September, more likely in October, but we are ready to go. We have all of the attorneys who are ready to roll. And of course, we have all of the international experts who will also join us here. All of us are in it for the cause. No one collects any money. This is all pro bono work, but we know that this is it. This is, plus, of course, the other indigenous people. Like Dexter Reinefeld is from Africa, and he just attended an African conference of African attorneys from all of the African countries. And he says the Africans, and the young ones in particular, are waking up. Well, the young ones in the western part of the world are the ones who are fast asleep, but in Africa it seems to be the other way around, and they want to get rid of they just got rid of their colonizers, their French colonizers in Niger, for example.
Yes.
And this is something that is really, really important to them. They will join forces with us.
That's excellent news. We're likely heading now into certainly more stormy waters over the next few months, with whispers of more measures coming down the line in view of new variants emerging. How could they possibly know prior to it arriving? And is this evidence stacked to show that there is a creation of a said problem, reaction, solution plan that they have yet again to roll out?
That is exactly what we believe. Yes, this is an agenda. It's a long planned agenda. We've seen some of maybe the more important exercises that they use to plan and train for this. The first one is probably, at least as far as we can see, is probably Operation Dark Winter from 2000 and shortly before 9/11. That was strictly a military exercise, and it dealt with a dangerous novel virus that was befalling the world's population. It was a military exercise, and one of the people who participated in it, Jim Bush, he's a retired lieutenant colonel of the American Armed Forces, he told us all about it. It was almost as though it was a blueprint for what we're seeing now. Then 10 years later, it was again, the usual suspects, the Rockefellers who had this exercise, I think it was called Operation Lockstep. And then, of course, finally in 2019, I believe it was October of 2019, it was Event 201, which is really Event 21 because the O in the middle is just a symbol for the planet. It is always these very same people. It is the super rich. They call themselves the elite. We call them the monsters. That's a quote from Dr. Rima Lebo. They're psychopaths. That is clear. They're psychopaths. I just did a dossier on this because after having conducted more than 450 interviews, I came to the conclusion that 90% of what we're seeing is just an illusion. And that is being created through psychological terrorism, which is really, if you take a closer look, it's mind control. It's MK Ultra 2.0, as one of our interviewees said, and that is what we have to look at. We have to make sure that people understand that it is absolutely of no use to try and convince the politicians who are responsible and who will be held accountable, or the media people, or the medical people, or the scientists. It is of no use to try and convince them that they're wrong, because they know they're wrong. And if they don't know it, they don't care, because they're being paid to be wrong, or they're being bribed or being extorted through this mechanism which nobody had any idea was as pervasive as it is, and that is ritual child abuse. So it is of no use to try and convince these people because they are not really human. They look like humans, they act like humans, they sometimes practice in front of a mirror in order to appear human, in order to show empathy, but they have absolutely no empathy. They have no regrets. They don't care about anything except what they want. And if we don't understand that, we're going to fall victim to them. This kind of psychopaths or sociopaths, it doesn't really matter. They cannot be treated and they cannot be cured. They cannot be trusted under no circumstances.
Yeah. And for this to go ahead, I mean, it requires the acquiescence of the many people out there. Do you think some kind of united non-compliance, people literally just not doing what they're telling them to do, and asking them to do moving forward, would just put an end to this immediately? Because it does take people's participation for them to be able to continue doing what they want to do.
Absolutely. Just say no. I forget who coined this slogan. I guess it was Nike. Just say no. That's all there's to it. If you don't consent to what they're doing, then it's all over in a minute, in a second. For some weird reason, and I think it is because there are just not enough people out there. The other side, Mr. Global, is maybe 300. There's this book by John Coleman, the Committee of the 300. Maybe it's 3,000. Plus all those millions of minions who they pay or extort. But as soon as our side of the fence decides not to play along any longer, I mean, we have decided that, but actions speak louder than words. For example, if you stop paying your taxes, they can incarcerate some of us, but they can't incarcerate all of us. So once we rise up, plus all those who are still undecided, who are still sitting on the fence, beginning to realize something is totally wrong, or beginning to ask questions, they can move over to our side of the fence. And if that happens, then it's game over for them. And that is what they're extremely afraid of. That's why they need to keep us in permanent panic mode, and they need some tool for that. And one of the tools out of their toolbox has been exhausted, and that's the virus scare, because most people will not go along with what they're trying to plan or what they're planning right now, probably beginning in September of this year. They're floating the idea, they're testing the waters. Like Alex Jones, for example, he did this thing, he said, oh, I've been talking to some members of the intelligence community and pilots, and I'm hearing this, they're reintroducing masks and probably social distancing and all these measures. I think what they're doing is they're testing the waters. This is a trial balloon, and if there's too much pushback, they won't do it because they're not going to get away with it. But then they will try and pull another one of their tools out of their toolbox, and that could very well be the Ukraine war, which I'm afraid they might push into Germany, because there's no more immediate threat than war. If people don't fall for the virus threat, like they didn't fall for the, what was it, the monkeypox thing?
Very convincing.
So insane. So, I mean, you can't scare them with global warming. We know that's a hoax too. And even those people who believe in global warming, it's not immediate enough. So the only immediate thing you can use in order to put people into panic mode immediately is, of course, the threat of real war. I hope it's not going to come to that, but we don't know.
It's certainly a possibility. And as you say, it's part of the toolbox. So, you know, we shouldn't give up on any level regardless. Now, you're pushing forward to bring about eventually a Nuremberg trial 2.0. Is there a firm timeline for your results with this? And when would you expect to see the likes of subpoenas being able to be issued for the bad actors that are involved?
Well, I will be forever grateful to my colleague Anna Garner from the United States. She's part of the team of international attorneys. And when we first realized that we would need to show the people not just individual pieces of the puzzle, but the whole story, the backdrop, which explains everything, the eugenics backdrop, how they founded the British Eugenics Society in 1906, and then its American counterpart in 1927, and who is involved in all this? The usual suspects. How they captured, or they didn't even need to capture any of these agencies and entities, they just founded them. They founded, for example, the not just the World Economic Forum, everybody knows it's evil, or the WHO, most people know it's evil, or the United Nations, most people understand they were taken over by the World Economic Forum. But even those who understand that these entities are evil had no, not all of them, but most of them had no idea that they started out as evil entities, because they were founded for just that purpose, to come to a one world government sooner or later. These were all stepping stones along the way. If you take all of this into consideration, you can't trust any of these entities. That's why no one is going to come to our help. We're going to have to do it ourselves. It is our own individual sovereignty that people have to realize we have. We're much stronger than most of us think, even on an individual basis. And then if we connect with each other, we're invincible. But people are beginning to realize that. So having said that, the timeline is for the first step of this legal journey, which will be sort of like grand jury investigation. We're calling it that so as to enable people to understand what it is, because most people know from TV, this is why I'm so grateful to Anna Garner, know from television shows that juries exist. Most of them think it's just the trial juries, but there's also the grand jury. The trial jury, or petite jury, is a body consisting usually of 12 jurors, but the grand jury serves a different purpose. And even though we're probably not gonna call it that, because we're simply submit to the Maori tikanga lore, and if they don't want to call it that, they call it something else. But the idea behind it is that of a grand jury investigation. What is that? To me, it's the most important step in the process. It is to get a jury of probably, I don't know, 28 or maybe 50 jurors, to get them to understand the whole evidence, to see the whole picture, eugenics, how the World Economic Forum, how the WHO, the United Nations, and all the others are all entities that are owned and operated by Mr. Global, as Catherine Austin Fitts calls them, or the monsters, as Rima Labo calls them. And they have to understand that there was never we're only talking about a pandemic right now, but of course we know it goes far beyond it, global warming, the Ukraine crisis, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to start somewhere. And this is something that we have investigated every little nook and cranny of, so to speak. So we'll explain by way of interviewing, by way of interrogating our witnesses, our expert witnesses, about how there was never a necessity for any measures, let alone so-called vaccines, which, as we now know, are not vaccines. They're genetic experiments. They're not even therapeutic. They're genetic experiments. If people get this whole picture, which ends up with genocide, which is what we're witnessing currently, if they understand this whole picture, they will ask more questions, and they'll understand that something's wrong with the idea of global warming, something's wrong with the Ukraine crisis. It's all staged. Unfortunately, a lot of people are dying. But what this grand jury investigation is about, or what we're doing and is based on this grand jury investigation is it allows us as attorneys, with the help of the expert witnesses, to present them with the whole picture. And then the jurors will decide, is this enough to indict the putative defendants? The putative defendants are those that we name as defendants. And since we're starting out in New Zealand, it's going to be the corporate government, which are imposters. illegitimate, but I'm not going to get into this right now. But we're going to start out with them because they pushed the so-called vaccinations. We're going to take a look at all of the doctors who pushed vaccinations or the so-called vaccinations, the scientists and everyone, including Jacinda Ardern, who stepped down a few months ago, but also including the WHO and Tedros, because we don't want to give them the opportunity to even try and think about, oh, this is our way out. We were just following orders, because that's what they did during the Nuremberg trials, the main war criminal trials. We were just following orders. That's not an excuse. You knew what you were doing, or you should have known what you were doing. Therefore, you're going to be liable. So that first step is only going to decide, or the jurors are only going to decide the question, is this evidence enough? Is it compelling so that we can continue with more legal proceedings, which is, we would translate this as either civil legal proceedings for damages, which is designed to take down all of those corporations involved in this, take them down because it's our money. And of course, with criminal proceedings, we would call it criminal proceedings. I don't know what they call it in their Tikanga lore. Criminal proceedings means those who are responsible are going to be put behind bars.
That's good. Let's look at the flip side of the coin of this. Can the removal of those being held accountable cause the failing of governments around the world? And would this create such a void enough to have the likes of the United Nations step in to take charge? And could we be creating the ideal situation for a one world governance to emerge?
That is probably their plan, yes. Their first attempt at creating a mini one world government, in our view, is the EU, the European Union, because they've got it totally under control. All of the leaders of the European Union come from this Young Global Leaders program of the World Economic Forum. And they're being thrown under the bus right now. Some of them probably have even gotten the shots, because most of them are quite obviously extremely stupid. So even though they probably believe that when this is all over, they're going to get a seat at the table, no, they're not. They're dealing with psychopaths if they're not psychopaths themselves. So these people kill each other. Yeah. And that is what's happening when they're throwing them under the bus, which happened to I forget his name in the Netherlands, and Macron seems to be next up, and then Scholz, the German chancellor, who is deeply involved in all of the major economic crimes that were committed in Germany over the last 10 years. So he's going to get thrown under the bus, and ultimately this is the message that they want the people to understand. Look, your national governments aren't up to the job. You'll need a one world government, or in this case, a European government under the auspices of that totally crooked and totally corrupt woman by the name of Ursula von der Leyen, the woman that wears a steel helmet, you know. And but if that works, they're going to take it one step further, and they're going to try and get a true one world government for the entire world. That is their intention. I don't think they're going to get that far, though, because as far as I'm concerned, and as far as our side of the fence is concerned, we believe that even though we may only be 20%, in Germany there's probably not more than 20% who are on the right side of the fence, on our side of the fence. In the United States, there's probably many more. In the African countries, it's probably many, many more. But even if we were only 20%, that's good enough, because we're those 20% that'll make the difference. We're the ones who are creative. We're the ones who have intuition, who are beginning to understand. In my case, at least, I'm beginning to understand about spirituality. Yeah. And that's what's really, really, really crucial. The other side of the fence, for Mr. Global, they're just cannon fodder, and for us, they're irrelevant. I feel sorry for some of them, not for all of them, but they're basically irrelevant. If they want help, if they decide, oh man, something is not right, we need more information, they're going to get it as far as we can give it to them. But ultimately, I believe that it's us, our 20%, hypothetically 20%, but I think that's probably on the low side. We're probably many, many, many more, because you have to keep in mind that what we're seeing is just a grand illusion. 90% of what we're seeing, I believe, is a grand illusion. So the numbers that we're getting from the mainstream media are probably forged. So, but if it's only 20%, that's good enough. And we do have to be ready when they finally drop their masks, when finally everything collapses, probably starting with our economies, at least in the Western world. We have to be ready to grab the steering wheel. And I think we will be, because we've been preparing for this for quite a while now.
Oh yeah, I think the people are a lot harder than what they're actually expecting. But we are now facing the very same play of a very corrupt and determined elite group who they're going to want to now start with masking and measures yet again as they push towards the new variants that they want to fearmonger around the news and media. What is the most empowering advice you can give to people right now in regards to this? We have this imminent attack upon us again against our freedoms and rights, and people are going to be in positions where they're going to have to choose. If they push the mandates again for vaccinations, people are going to have to make a choice on whether they keep their job or lose their job in what is basically an employer overreach of their positions to try and force people to take whatever it is that's coming down the line. What would be the best advice you can give to these people right now on this? For me, the line in the sand is just don't do it. Your job is something that pays for your lifestyle, but it's certainly nothing that can replace your health.
Yeah, well, I think we have to distinguish. There's two pieces of advice. To the people who are on our side of the fence, I would say simply stay the course. Don't panic, because that is exactly what this is designed to do. Put you in panic mode, because if you're in panic mode, they think you will follow orders. So don't panic, stay the course. Keep on working on creating our own independent, self-sufficient societies, which then connect with each other. The other side of the fence, those who are beginning to wonder, we have to tell them that they must not get another shot. I've been speaking to so many people here in Mexico now, not just Mexicans, but also Canadians who literally fled their country, and Americans, and not all of them, despite the fact that they got the shots, many of them, not all of them are lost. And the other thing that they need to know is that there is help. It is possible to help them. They're different. I don't understand it because I'm not a scientist, but I've been speaking to scientists. Dr. Rima Lebo is one of them. It is possible to get most of this junk out of your body, the heavy metals, etc. It is probably even possible with the help of frequencies. Again, I don't understand it. I'm just repeating what they're telling me. With the help of frequencies to get everything out of your body. But the more shots you get, the more likely it is that there's nothing we can do for you. That's why don't get the shots.
Yeah. Now, when you take on such a powerful establishment, it obviously comes with certain risks. Have you had any warnings or threats in regards to the work that you're doing?
No. My wife and I have no warnings whatsoever. What they have, my former co-host from the Corona Investigative Committee, who, in our view, with absolute certainty, works for the other side, for Mr. Global. And I also think it's not just in a criminal sense that she's responsible, she understands what she's doing and she can control what she's doing, but she literally knows that she's working for them. So she did the most damage by, not just to me, but also to the entire resistance, by claiming all of a sudden, out of the blue, that there's something wrong with the finances of the Corona Investigative Committee. There's irregularities as far as the donations are concerned. Now, I can tell you again, which I've done many, many times before, I've never collected even 1 cent for my work in the resistance. I did earn quite some money while my firm was still going strong. They're trying to destroy it right now. but I never, ever collected even 1 cent for my work in the resistance. Neither did Dexter, and neither did any of the other attorneys who were on board with us. But that's what she claimed, while at the same time, she's the one who had embezzled hundreds of thousands of, well, I think that's called, I forget the technical term, the medical term, but, well, I shouldn't get into this, but that's the kind of damage that was done. There was no threat or anything, but that's better than a threat because it works immediately. All of a sudden, you are defunded because as a result of this, our accounts were canceled by the banks. One of the accounts was attached 4 or 5 months ago by the Göttingen District of Attorney. This is a special prosecutor's office that searches the internet for people who are just asking questions. But if they're even critical of the government, of the official narrative, then that's exactly who they go after. Then they put them on trial and hold them liable for all kinds of imaginary crimes. And since most of the world doesn't even see what's going on, this is not published in the mainstream media. This is probably much, much, much worse than what went on during the Third Reich. During the Third Reich, people knew what was going on. Now, much of what happens goes on behind the scenes. But other than that, nope, they're trying to defund us. Yes, they're trying to destroy my firm, and it's very, very hard for the few people who are still working for me. But we're still unscathed, apart from the fact that we have no money anymore. But we have friends. We have friends who are helping.
Yeah. And speaking of friends, I've moved to Mexico. I've met a lot of very good, like-minded people who have moved down here for the same reason. You're now living in Mexico also. I know why I came here, and we briefly discussed it before the show. But what was the deciding factor of this location for you?
Well, it was a combination of my wife's intent to visit friends from Germany who had sold everything in Germany because they saw what was going on, and they said, if we keep our house, it's not going to do us any good anymore because they're going to be forced liens on all of the private real estate, and this is what's going on right now. They're going to make it impossible for us to pay for anything by introducing new ways of heating systems that make absolutely no sense but are extremely expensive. Then there's the Damocles sword of the Ukraine war hovering over us. Plus, there's going to be fewer and fewer buyers because a lot of people are going to be killed because of the so-called vaccinations. So they sold everything, came to Mexico, and are now building themselves a really nice home with a great view. So she wanted to visit them. And I hadn't really intended to come to Mexico, but I had to leave the States because I wanted to do this interview with Barry Trower. I should call him Dr. Barry Trower because the only reason he doesn't have the doctorate is because the deep state didn't want to give it to him. But you know who he is. He is the most important force or the authority on microwave radiation, 3G, 4G, 5G. It's not just 5G. Yeah. And so but if you want to interview him, you can't do it by Wi-Fi because obviously he doesn't believe in that. It's microwave radiation. So you have to go and see him in person. That's what I did. I came to England, stayed there for 3 days, had the nicest and most interesting interviews with him and his wife. Then I went on to Germany, picked up my wife, and we were going to do another interview, a live interview of a shaman in Peru. That's the spiritual side that we wanted to take a closer look at. And so that's where we went. And on, I think it was January 28th, I was going to fly back from Lima, Peru, to the ranch, and she was going to go visit our friends. And all of a sudden, the night before the flight went, I was informed by the airline people that my right to re-enter the country had been canceled. So that is the moment that I had to make a choice, and I said, well, the only thing I can do right now is reroute the flight and fly to Mexico, this is what we did, and we've been here for the last half year, more than a half a year now. I couldn't go to Germany either because all of a sudden our passports were stolen on top of this.
Ah, wow, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, if we know where we're heading, we're pretty clued into the way things are going. But if we have a financial collapse like nothing else the world has ever seen before, would your case continue, or would there be far more important things to deal with at this point?
No, our cases will continue. There's nothing that'll stop us from doing that, because it is important to understand what we're up against. If you understand, only if you can see the whole picture, will you make the right choices. And it is important to make the right choices while we are building up our own little independent and self-sufficient societies. That's why both has to happen at the same time. We have, and only if we're working on these self-sufficient societies that create their own energy, that have their own food supply lines, et cetera, will we be able to survive this collapse. Those on the other side of the fence may not, because some of them are going to be totally unprepared. We won't be unprepared. We know what's going on.
Yeah. So with the financial side, does the enabled control mechanism of CBDCs, the central bank digital currency, concern you? And are people like you and me at risk of being shut down for choosing to speak out?
I think that there is a real risk, but the risk is not only there for us, but for everyone else as well, because those are the two goals, population reduction and population control. Population control means one world government and the introduction of CBDC. However, they didn't get very far. For example, I think it was the country either of Nigeria or Niger, where they did try it and only 0.5% of the population accepted it. Yeah. So they're not ready yet. This is a kind of an early start that they were pushed into. They're not ready yet. And at the same time, we are, and we're going to be talking to the experts in this field. We're talking to people who know how to set up a new financial and monetary system. It may be based on, I don't know, a Bitcoin technology. I don't know about that because, again, I'm not an expert in this field. But I've spoken to a number of people who make a lot of sense to me. And again, this is like Lord what's his name in England, the former Supreme Court Justice, Lord Sumption, is that his name? Yeah. He said, you don't have to be an expert in order to understand the medical issues or the technical issues. All you have to have is common sense. Yeah. And then when people explain to you from their area of expertise how they would handle this problem, then you're smart enough to make up your own mind. And I think we are. And if we are being taught how to do it, and whatever we need to do, like creating a new monetary and financial system, makes sense to us, is plausible, then we can work with it. And that will make us immune to their introduction of CBDC. It'll only be those who are not prepared that will fall victim to it.
Yeah. Now, if you could give people hope, what would it be?
Well, if you look at what's going on the one hand, they're trying to reintroduce, they're trying to introduce a pandemic 2.0. From what some people are telling us, it looks as though in mid-September they're going to try and reintroduce mask mandates and social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, their aggressiveness is almost unbearable because, as I said, this one judge in Germany who was still willing to uphold the rule of law, he was sentenced to 2 years on probation. This is totally unheard of. And Sushrit Bhakti is in danger. He is he won at the trial level, but there is the other side. The DA's office appealed that judgment, and the higher you go up the ranks, as I explained earlier, the more likely it is that you will run into one or more of their puppets, because they stacked the system, especially the judiciary.
Oh, yeah.
But if you take both of these factors and take a look at the totality of the evidence, it is becoming so clear, at least to me, that they're running out of options. They're with their backs against the wall, and sometimes they're even honest. I think it was Klaus Schwab himself who said, we only have a very small window of opportunity. I think it's closing on them right now.
Good. That's exactly what I want to hear. And, you know, people need to realize as well, and a lot of people out there just go around the day-to-day thing with the blinkers on, that, you know, we have you've mentioned the European Union before. There's a group of unelected people there making decisions for others. But we also have this mass infiltration with the young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. And this is people who are in high positions of government, industry, and any sphere of influence that we can have over people in the world. And that means that, unfortunately, if the governments have been infiltrated by the World Economic Forum, everything that sits under the umbrella of government, that being the legal and judicial system, is also corrupted by not only funding, but also what the government dictate to it. It's a very upside down system, but it's certainly a system of a pyramid where the power is very, very highly concentrated at the top. To dismantle this, it is a huge task, an absolutely huge task to dismantle this. But do you see the fact that they think they're so untouchable and so big that they could actually destroy themselves by the actions that they're doing?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a very distinct possibility. And one of the reasons why this is likely, very likely to happen, is not just because most of their puppets are so extremely stupid that it's even obvious to even those who are on the wrong side of the fence. I mean, for a long time, I used to think that the German Secretary of State, Annalena Baerbock, is the stupidest woman in the world. But then I looked at, what's her name, Kamala Harris, from the United States, the vice president, and I think I can't decide, but these people are so obviously stupid. Most of them don't have any background. They have fake biographies. This includes this guy by the name of Professor Dr. Drosten of Charité University, who at the behest of the WHO invented the two basic lies on which everything stands. One is asymptomatic infections, which is a blatant lie, and the other is that he had invented a special PCR test to detect the infections with COVID. But that's one part, which I think should encourage us. They're too stupid. And the other part is that most of us on this side of the fence have been working on building something that will be in place when the system collapses. And the system is designed to collapse. They want it to collapse. So do we. Because we realize that the system cannot be fixed. There's no way. Well, you know, our constitutions are, most of them, even the German constitution that isn't really a constitution, it's the basic law, but it's sort of like a constitution. The American Constitution, those are great democratic platforms to stand on. I think democracy is probably still the best way of government, so that should survive. The rule of law should too, but the most important thing is to get ready and to have all these little self-sufficient communities that are connected but not ruled over by any global or other entity. Because if those, and they're building them up everywhere, and if they're in place, then we will be okay, because we will have our own food supply, we will have our own energy supply. It'll all be there while the system is collapsing. There is going to be a transition period, I think, because we cannot go from one system to the other. And I think that's what this BRICS multipolar world is all about. We're moving from a unipolar world, which is run and operated by the Anglo-American mafia, to a multipolar world, which doesn't look so bad, but it is not going to be the end result either. The end result is us, the people, realizing that we are all sovereign individuals who can connect, and through this connection are going to be absolutely invincible. Once we realize that, it's all over for the other side.
No, that's it, definitely. You mentioned a little bit earlier, obviously, that you were denied entry back into the country of origin. Was that the US that would not allow you back in?
It was the U.S. that canceled my right to re-enter overnight. But then, of course, our passports were stolen. So, and this is not obviously not because somebody was trying to make money selling them, but rather I see this as a targeted attempt to keep us from moving around, keep me from traveling to places where I might be giving presentations or help with local lawsuits. There are a number of lawsuits that I'm involved as an advisor that are going on right now. And of course, it seems to me that it is important for Mr. Global to keep me from being anywhere present, physically present anywhere, because that might give extra support to the resistance. But that's all right. I can handle that.
Yeah. And have you looked any further into the legality of stopping you flying into the country?
Yeah, well, if I could have hired an attorney, and he or she probably would have cost me 10, 20, or $30,000, which I wouldn't have been able to pay. And the only result that you can expect from engaging an attorney is immigration is going to give you the answer, oh, this is a matter of national security, which is, of course, a lie, but that ends all discussion. Yeah. And I'm not going to pay $20,000 or $30,000 for such a stupid answer.
No, not when you already know it.
Yeah.
So if you could give people a final warning that will serve them well moving forward over, say, the next 6 months, what would that be?
The next 6 months, that's a good timeline, because I do think that over the next 6 months, things will change drastically. I think, judging from the little video clip I saw from Alex Jones, judging from the fact that at some of the university hospitals, I'm still connected with through my friends from when I was still doing medical and pharmaceutical law. Some of the hospitals in Germany are already introducing mask mandates again. Judging from this fact, it'll all start in mid-September, but they will very soon realize that there's too much pushback. They won't get away with it. Pandemic 2.0 will not work. So things are coming to a head. If you stay in the saddle over the next 6 months, I think we will all see not just the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're coming out of the tunnel into the light right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm hearing as well. We've had some incredible guests from financial and doctors and many different areas of expertise over the past few years. And talking with them, the funny thing is they're given exactly the same kind of timeline of what they're seeing. And the mix appears to be, the possibility of the financial collapse and many different multi-pronged attacks that they have within that toolbox that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So, people need to be prepared. People right now need to awaken to the reality of the situation. There's no point further burying the head in the sand and ignoring it. This is not going to go away. And it's not the fact that people should be ignoring what's coming down the line in regards to the bad things. People really should now also be preparing for the good things that are coming in the future for them. A far greater life, a far better opportunity, not only for the people alive now, but also for their children and grandchildren moving forward. This is something that, we truly deserve as a human race around the world. And we need to get ready for this now. This is the time. It's probably to a lot, it seems like the worst time in history to ever be alive, but I do have a feeling that it could also be the greatest time in human history to ever be alive and experience this and see the changes that we go through. Is there anything else that you would like to talk to us about before we leave today?
No, that is the most important message. You got to wake up and smell the coffee. This is what a former girlfriend of mine, who unfortunately is now, she's an American, who is unfortunately on the wrong side of the fence, but that's what she always said. Wake up and smell the coffee. It's time to act. It's actions speak louder than words. We have to get ready. We have to see what's going on. It's mincing words or political correctness it's over. We have to see what's really going on, or else you're not going to make the right choices.
Yeah. Reiner Fuellmich, this has been an absolutely incredible interview. I hope that we can talk again in the future and, you know, find out where we're going, where we're heading, maybe set a slight adjustment on the course that we are heading. And I can only wish you the greatest of success with what you're doing. This is something that the world needs. It's certainly something that a lot of people are watching and hoping for. I think you've got a lot of support out there and a lot of people that really want to see this through. And my hat is off to you for the bravery and the effort and everything that you're putting in here. So thank you very much for coming on and talking to us today. And if you want to stay on when we finish the interview, maybe we'll have a quick chat before we finish.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Same here. It's a real pleasure. I knew it.
And as we say here at the Atlantic Underground podcast, believe nothing and question everything. And that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.